Okay, so you want to own a jet ski rental business. In your head, it's the best job in America. You're standing on a dock in board shorts, handing keys to tourists, collecting cash, and going home at 5 while everyone else is stuck in an office. Sun, water, easy money. Here's the number that should stop you cold. The U.S. personal watercraft rental and tour market is estimated at roughly $850 million a year, spread across an estimated 4,000 to 5,000 operators nationwide, most of them tiny, 3 to 10 machines, one location, one season. And here's the sharper number. The average operator in this space nets somewhere between 8 and 14% of revenue after everything, in a business where a single machine can cost you $14,000 and be worth almost nothing in 6 years. That's the gap, an $850 million industry that looks like a cash cow from the dock and behaves, financially, like a depreciation treadmill with a 5-month runway. You're not really in the fun business, you're in the asset utilization business, and you have 20 weekends to make the whole thing work. Understand that gap and you understand this business. Miss it and you'll go bankrupt owning one of the most envied-looking businesses on your local waterfront. Let's zoom out first, because you need to understand why this industry exists at all before you understand why it's so unforgiving. Personal watercraft rental exists because of a very simple mismatch. Millions of people want the experience of riding a jet ski maybe twice a year, and almost none of them want to own one. A new watercraft runs you $10,000 to $18,000 before you've bought a trailer, insurance, or a place to store it. So the market does what markets do. It rents out the experience instead of selling the asset. Now, here's the part most first-time owners get wrong. You'd assume your customer is boating enthusiasts. They're not, mostly. Your real customer is the bachelorette party, the family reunion, the guy trying to impress a date, the out-of-town tourist who has exactly one free Saturday on the lake. You're not selling watercraft time. You're selling a 2-hour adrenaline memory to someone who will never buy a jet ski in their life. That distinction matters because it tells you your real competition isn't other rental shops. It's ziplining, parasailing, the brewery tour, and the hotel pool. You're competing for a slice of someone's vacation budget, not for boating market share. And demand here is more durable than people think, but only in one direction. Domestic experience tourism has been one of the steadiest growth lines in leisure spending through 2025 and into 2026. People cutting back on big-ticket purchases, but still paying for a memorable afternoon. That's good news. The bad news is this demand is brutally seasonal and brutally weather-dependent, which we'll come back to because it's the thing that actually kills these businesses. Now, not all jet ski rental is the same business, and this is where a lot of buyers get seduced by the wrong number. There are basically 4 segments here. First, the dock and go hourly rental shop, the classic version, machines tied up at a marina, walk-up customers, hourly rates. These run high revenue per unit, but brutal margins, often 10 to 15% net, because you're bleeding fuel, damage, and staffing costs all day. Second, the guided tour model. You're not renting the machine, you're selling an experience, a mangrove tour, a sandbar run with a guide leading a pack of renters. Margins jump to 20 to 28% because you can charge premium pricing and you control the pace, but your liability exposure is enormous because you're now responsible for group behavior on open water. Third, the franchise or branded model. Operators who buy into an established tour brand get marketing support and standardized safety protocols and pay a royalty of 6 to 10% of revenue for it. Lower upside, but dramatically lower failure rate because someone else has already solved your marketing problem. And fourth, the resort or hotel concession model. You don't own the beach, you don't handle marketing, you just pay the resort a placement fee or revenue share of 20 to 35% to operate on their property with guaranteed foot traffic. The lowest margin of the 4, often 8 to 12% net, but the most stable because you're not fighting for customers, the resort is bringing them to you. The trade-off across all 4 is the same trade-off you'll see in every rental asset business. The more control you keep, the more marketing and liability risk you're carrying yourself. The more you outsource to a franchise, to a resort, the more margin you give away for stability. So let's strip this business down to its actual operating logic, because it's simpler than people expect. You buy machines, you put them in the water, you rent hours, you collect a rate per hour, per half day, or per tour package. That's it. That is the entire business model on paper. But there's exactly one number that determines whether you're rich or broke by September, and it's not your hourly rate. It's your utilization rate, the percentage of your rentable hours that a machine actually has a paying customer on it. Everyone obsesses over the sticker rate, the "we charge $120 an hour" number. That number is almost irrelevant next to utilization because your fixed costs, dock fees, insurance, loan payments, staff wages, don't care whether the machine sat idle or got rented 6 times today. Let's do the math live because this is where the business either works or doesn't. Say you own 8 jet skis. You paid $13,500 each, so $108,000 in fleet cost. You're open roughly 150 operating days a year, call it May through September, weather permitting, for 8 hours a day. That's 1,200 rentable hours per machine, 9,600 hours across the fleet. You charge an average of $95 an hour blended across hourly and pocket rates. At 40% utilization, which is actually a realistic first-year number for a new operator with no brand recognition, you're renting 3,840 hours a year. That's $364,800 in gross rental revenue. Sounds fantastic. Now subtract fuel at roughly $6 an hour of runtime, so call it $23,000. Subtract routine maintenance and parts, another $18,000. Subtract dock and slip fees, $30,000. Subtract 2 seasonal staff at $18 an hour for the season, roughly $65,000 combined with payroll tax. Subtract insurance, and we'll get to why this number is brutal, at $45,000 for the year. Subtract your equipment financing, say $24,000 in annual payments on that $108,000 fleet loan. You're now down to roughly $160,000 in costs against $364,800 in revenue, leaving you around $205,000 before owner's draw and taxes, which actually looks decent. Now watch what happens when utilization drops to 25% instead of 40% because of one rainy summer, one algae bloom closing the lake for 3 weeks, one bad review cycle. Revenue collapses to about $228,000, but your costs barely move because fuel is the only cost that scales down with usage. Everything else, the insurance, the dock fees, the loan payment, the staff you still need on site whether or not anyone rents, stays essentially flat. Suddenly, you're clearing maybe $70,000 to $90,000 across an entire season on $108,000 of depreciating equipment. That's the trap. A 15-point swing in utilization, which is just a bad summer, not a catastrophe, cuts your profit by 2/3. That's why utilization, not your hourly rate, is the only number that actually matters in this business. So what does it actually take to get into this? Location first, and this is where most first-timers get blindsided. You need water access with legal commercial launch rights, which almost never means you can just show up at a public boat ramp. Most states require a commercial marine operator's permit, and many popular lakes in coastal zones have capped the number of commercial watercraft permits issued, sometimes with wait lists running years long. In Florida, for example, several counties have frozen new commercial PWC permits entirely because of noise and wildlife complaints, meaning your fastest path in is often buying out an existing permit holder for $20,000 to $60,000 just for the right to operate before you've bought a single machine. Then licensing. You'll need a business operating license, a state watercraft dealer or rental endorsement in most coastal states, and in many jurisdictions a specific livery or for-hire vessel registration separate from personal boat registration. Figure $500 to $3,000 combined, depending on the state. You'll need commercial marine liability insurance, and this is the surprise that breaks people. Because passenger injury claims on rental watercraft are common and expensive, annual premiums often run $4,000 to $7,000 per machine, meaning an 8-unit fleet can be paying $35,000 to $55,000 a year in insurance alone, often more than payroll. The bureaucratic gut punch nobody expects going in is the environmental and zoning fight. Coastal counties and lake associations increasingly restrict PWC hours, decibel limits, and no-wake zone boundaries, and public hearings over new rental operations regularly turn into multi-month fights with residents who don't want jet skis buzzing past their dock all day. It's not unusual for a permit application to take 6 to 12 months of hearings before you rent a single hour. Now, let's build the actual startup budget using our 8-unit fleet as the running example. 8 watercraft at $13,500 average, $108,000. A commercial launch and dock lease deposit plus build-out, ramp, tie-downs, a small rental kiosk or shipping container office, $35,000. Trailers and a tow vehicle if you don't already have one, $22,000. Commercial permit acquisition, the one most people forget to budget entirely, $30,000. First-year insurance paid up front because most carriers want it that way for new operators, $45,000. Life jackets, safety gear, radios, and required safety equipment for the fleet, $9,000. Point of sale and booking software, website, initial marketing, $12,000. Working capital cushion to cover the first slow month before revenue stabilizes, $25,000. That's $286,000 all in before you've rented your first hour, and that's the lean version. Add a second location or premium tour packaging and you're well past $400,000. Now the revenue and profitability reality check, because there's a wide gap between the dream and the average outcome. On the top end, the well-known branded operators, think of the scale of a national tour franchise with dozens of licensed locations, can push individual high-traffic locations past $1 million in seasonal revenue with utilization rates above 55% because they've solved the two hardest problems in this business: consistent booking volume and brand trust that lowers customer acquisition costs to nearly zero. Their net margins can land in the 20 to 25% range because volume absorbs the fixed insurance and permanent costs across far more rental hours. The realistic independent operator, our 8-unit example, is looking at $300,000 to $400,000 in gross revenue in a good season, with a genuinely good year netting somewhere around 15 to 18% after debt service, and a bad year netting closer to 4 to 7%, sometimes less. And that's before you count the risk factors that actually wreck this business over time. A single lawsuit from a passenger injury can run past your insurance cap and take years to resolve. New environmental restrictions can shrink your operating window mid-season with no notice, and every machine you own is losing roughly 12 to 15% of its value a year, whether it gets rented or not, which means your fleet is a depreciating clock running in the background of every decision you make. So, the verdict: should you actually do this? If you already have marine mechanical experience, existing water access or a permit relationship, and enough capital cushion to survive a genuinely bad summer without missing a loan payment, this can be a real, profitable seasonal cash business, especially layered onto an existing marina or resort operation where you're not starting from zero on customer acquisition. If you're coming in cold chasing the dock and cash fantasy with a bank loan and no permit secured, you are underwriting a business where one rainy July can erase your entire year's margin on a fleet that's losing value every single day it sits in the water. This business rewards operators who treat every idle hour like a bill collector at the door, and it bankrupts everyone who thought the hard part was buying the jet skis. You're not renting watercraft, you're racing depreciation against the weather, and the weather always gets a vote.